We are now pretty deep into season 2 of the Rings of Power, and in the first 5 episodes, there were plenty of issues, but the 5th episode was by far the best one. So how does episode 6 fare? We begin in this episode with Arondir as he takes down some orcs. He finds on one of the bodies a map that shows a region, and so he knows that the orcs are on their way there. And so for the next episode, when we get the big action scene, it won't be a surprise when Arondir shows up. And if you're hoping for some more Arondir content in this episode, that's all you're getting. Next up, we head over to Eregion and we see Celebrimbor, and he's pretty annoyed because these whole 9 rings for men aren't going so well. And as we can see on the floor here, they're all the previous attempts. Celebrimbor says they need more mithril, but Modania says that the dwarves have been tardy with their delivery, and later on in the episode we'll see Sauron go himself to go and ask King Durin for some more mithril. Celebrimbor then shows his frustration, saying that he'll just have to do things himself, but Modania says that we're labouring as hard as we can. But the thing is, I've never seen these characters really do anything. They're just sort of always standing in the background. You know, they've got a bit of sweat on their face and a bit of cold maybe, but it would be good now and again to maybe see them do something. Like, I'm kind of on Celebrimbor's side here. Like, you know, why are you people even here? It seems though that under all this work, Celebrimbor is losing his marbles a bit, as he asks Modania here, what is your name again, Smith? But to be fair to him, when we get to season 3 of the show, I'll probably be asking the same thing. Sauron enters the room and they all leave, and then that's when he finally remembers her name, and Sauron's probably thinking, how can you forget Modania? That's the girl who is not quite Galadriel, but she'll do. And to continue with this whole Celebrimbor losing his mind story, he thinks he's left his creasing hammer just behind him, so where did he leave it? Well...
And... You mean that hammer?
Right behind him. During this conversation here between Celebrimbor and Sauron, Sauron says that his people demand an audience, but as Celebrimbor says, until the 9 are complete, nothing else matters, and so he stays inside to do his work, which means that Sauron can go outside and do his own bidding with the people and sort of become a sort of a leader himself amongst the people of the Region, and even as well get given the task by Celebrimbor to go and sort out the whole mithril shortage with the dwarves. Sauron then goes outside to speak to the people of the Region, and he says that Celebrimbor asked him to handle all matters of administration, which is just a complete lie. Instead, you know, Celebrimbor said to sort out the dwarf situation with the mithril, and that's it. That's as far as he said anything. He just said that priority is the 9 rings, so Sauron's just doing his own thing at this point. Next, we see one of the commanders explain to Sauron that one of the gatehouses, which is usually quite lively, suddenly went quiet, and so they sent some soldiers over there to find out what was going on, but only one returned, and they returned in this state here with this writing on their chest, which apparently means, where is he? As we see here, he does reveal that to Modania, and so I do expect that she'll be the one to eventually piece this puzzle together, that they've got Sauron living under their roof. At the end of last episode, we saw Adar and Galadriel and how they might want to team up and fight a common enemy. And so in here, we have them having some dinner, and they talk about what they were promised by Sauron, where he says he was promised children, and with Galadriel that she was promised an army. Adar reveals to Galadriel that he has Morgoth's crown, and that he used it to slay him, which we saw in that first episode flashback. Adar also tells Galadriel that he knows that Halbrand is Sauron, and he says that it now rests on her ability to put aside her pride when it comes to joining forces. Following this, we head over to our favourite place, that is Numenor, as we see the one and only Pharazôn with Elendil as he stands trial for high treason, but he says that he'll be set free, provided, of course, he renounces his crimes. He gets asked the question whether he accepts Pharazôn as the true king of Numenor, and he says, I do not. Pharazôn then gets proposed an idea that maybe they should let the Valar decide his fate, but that involves this. Yeah, I don't really think Elendil is going to have much hope with this. Next up, we see the stranger have a nightmare about Nori being killed by the Dark Wizard, as he speaks here of Tom Bombadil. He finally does look a bit more like Tom Bombadil here, but he isn't Tom Bombadil. That's the big issue for me here. This character is just such a different character in the books, and the sort of character where I think, just leave him in the books. If you're not going to be able to get him into a show or a film in the proper way, then don't even bother. Have another wizard. I don't think they needed to have Tom Bombadil. They could have actually had someone else in this position, but they just wanted to use that name because it's the name people will know, Tom Bombadil. Next, we see the only scene of the episode featuring Nori as she speaks to Gundabel Fawler about how she buried her father in this place and some other stuff. It's one of those sort of scenes where if you slept through it, it doesn't really matter. Not forgetting Poppy though, we also see her in this episode as she gets to know the locals. It is quite funny though how they literally just met the other day. They've had a couple of conversations on screen and then suddenly boom, there we go. They're in love. Before the scene ends, we do see a brief conversation between the pair of them, and they say how the Dark Wizards folk are only after them because of their connection with the stranger, and if they turn themselves in, they might as well be putting the whole world at risk. The reason they want to turn themselves in is because that'll mean those people will leave these other people alone. But, you know, as I just said, they'll put the whole world at risk. Would you rather the world be at risk, or would you rather these Hobbit people be at risk? I mean, you know, I think it's a pretty simple answer. Tom Bombadil then speaks some familiar lines and then says there are times when one path becomes two and you must choose, stating how he's got to choose between a friend in Nori or his destiny. He then does a disappearing act, and that's the end of the whole Tom Bombadil and Stranger storyline for this episode. And a bit like the whole Nori and Poppy one, we don't really get a lot here. It's just, here's where you're going to find your staff, off I go. And, you know, I assume maybe we'll see a bit of this maybe in the next episode. And if not, because, you know, next episode is going to be mainly focused on the battle with Eregion. But then if we don't see anything in that episode, we'll see it in the finale. But then that is the finale. And so looking at this whole season, we haven't really progressed very much with Nori and Poppy and the Stranger. This has been quite, you know, I think maybe we'll get a lot of this in season 3 perhaps. I mean, I don't really see how it's all going to wrap up in one season, you know. I think the Dark Wizards will come into it in the finale. I do expect that. But how far that goes, I think, you know, surely it's not all going to wrap up so quickly, so it will be probably you know, planted for the next season. We're going all over the place in this episode. Next up, we are in Khazad-dûm, and we have Sauron here talking to King Durin, asking for more Mithril as requested by Celebrimbor. And for some reason, he says this to him. He says, "I have just learned that Eregion is under threat of invasion," which of course puts him in a pretty bad bargaining position as the king exploits later in the scene, as he says to Prince Durin that, you know, they're going to need it. They're going to have to obviously bump the price up because they're in, you know, they're running out of time. So I don't really know why he said that. So yeah, Sauron suggests a lot of timber in exchange for the Mithril, and the king says no, which does anger Sauron quite a bit. And Prince Durin thinks, oh, you know, my father's still here, but as I just said, he wants to actually get more. He's still showing his greed of the ring. Prince Durin then asks his father whether he's gone mad, and he responds by saying, "The whole world's gone mad, my son." And I think we can all agree with that. Prince Durin then asks him to take off the ring, and the king says it belongs to him, and he responds by saying, "No, you belong to it." As the words don't work, he does then try some actions, as we see here, as the king uses the ring's power to force him back. Following this encounter, we see Deezer speak with Prince Durin and say how the ring has really taken over his father, but Prince Durin's struggling with the fact that he still sees him as his father. He still sees his eyes, still sees him as someone he can't go up against. And, you know, she says he'll destroy himself and take the kingdom with him, so she's really trying to drive home that point. But I will say this, you know, it was a scene that was needed, but it went on a little bit too long, I would say. We then hop back over to Numenor, and we see Elendil speaking with his daughter Arianne, and she cracks under the pressure because she says she doesn't want to lose her father after also losing her brother Isildur, as she still believes. She tries to make him swallow his pride, but he says no, and so she brings out the big guns with Miriel, and she even says bow to Pharazôn. But even she can't convince him round, and he says that if it is the will of the Valar that my life be spared, then it will be. So let's go and see how that all ends up. But hold on just 1 minute, we are going to go quickly back to Khazad-dûm because we have this scene here with Deezer, which from the offset I just thought this was a fake. I didn't think it was the real Deezer. But as you'll see in a second, it is the real Deezer as she replicates what it's like to have a really tough shit. What the fuck? So what was all that about? Well, that was her calling the bats down for them to chase those dwarfs away from mining. And you might be thinking, why are the dwarfs scared of bats? I mean, they should be used to bats, no? It's like being in the city and you see some pigeons flying and you're thinking, oh, it's pigeons! Oh my god, pigeons! It's like, I'm pretty used to pigeons by now. So yeah, this is a really odd scene. It's something where you think, maybe they should have deleted this. It feels really like a deleted scene. Now look, there were a lot of bats there, but with bats, once they're gone, they're gone. I mean, just let them go and then go back to work. I don't really see like it's something which will make the dwarves disappear for a very long time, you know? So, you know, I understand they want to try and delay this whole mining process, but This was a very odd choice for them to decide on. Prince Jonan says, I love you to her, and she says, love me later, which does put a very interesting image in my head. So here we are for Elendil's big moment. But there is a last minute curveball here, as Miriel says that she has the right to face the Valar's judgment in his place. And so down she goes, and we see the sea creature there looking at her and giving her a big old roar. She then gets yeeted out of the water, which means she's deemed innocent. And so with that, the crowd go wild as she is queen of the sea, as Elendil says, and Pharazôn's not looking so happy. And I bet the guy who was shouting, Pharazôn, 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 I bet he's a little bit sad as well.
Are you saying boo or boo-earns?
I was saying boo-earns.
Ending our time in Numenor for this episode, we see Pharazôn touch the Palantir once again, and this time we does see Sauron. And with 2 episodes ago, I have to say that this Numenor storyline has been bloody awful. I mean, first we had the whole Pharazôn eagle situation, then they destroyed some shrine and killed the dude, then we had the whole Elendil thing, which happened this episode where the queen takes over, she gets given the okay by the sea beast, now she's back as queen, and he's obviously pissed off. So, you know, this all just happened so quickly. It all just felt so lightweight. And it was all pretty stupid as well. I mean, we've never really given any explanation about the whole eagle thing. He was just there. So it's like, okay, fine. He's going to take over from the queen. But yeah, I wonder how it's going to end, though. Like he's obviously going to do something in the last episode, I expect. But yeah, for a storyline with Numenor, I mean, I thought last season was bad, but this season probably trumps it. Next up, we join back to that previous conversation between Adar and Galadriel, and she says how Sauron won't leave Eregion because he will not attempt to escape until his task is complete in terms of completing the rings. She then asks Adar to unlock her, and he does, and she provides some information saying how Elrond's on his way from Lindon with an army of elves, and she even mentions that he's got her ring, Nenya. And I don't really know why she would reveal that. That's a bit of an odd thing to do, to reveal that sort of information. Galadriel then says they can combine to destroy any trace of Sauron, but Adar's thinking long term, so what will happen afterwards? What will happen to the orcs? Will your High King permit us to return home in peace? He then continues to say that the shadow has been cast over not just her, but over all Elvendom, and that your drive to prove your virtue will work right into Sauron's designs. She then says you speak lies, hoping I reveal something, which we know she just bloody did a minute ago. And right there is the face of someone who's like, oh shit, I thought you were cool, dude. Galadriel then questions the size of his army, but then he says, but did you really think I'm going to take on Sauron with just one single legion? Are you stupid? And then we see all these orcs, well, we don't really see them very well. We see a lot of lights go up to represent the orcs, and, you know, we see this big army. And the thing is to say about this is that last episode, a lot of people were criticizing the show, saying, you know, how are we supposed to believe this? Adar's only got a few orcs. He's really going to take on Eregion. This is stupid. But now we see the next episode that he actually does have a big army. And so sometimes you do have to wait before you criticize. Like, it's okay to criticize a scene like I did earlier, because that's that single scene. It's not going to expand from that. But for certain things, you do have to wait. And especially if you think watching this show in a binge, this would come naturally anyway. So, you know, sometimes I think it's easy to criticize the Rings of Power for some shortcomings, but at other times you do just have to be a bit patient and wait for things to play out naturally. And just so you can see them, here are the orcs, which do seem a bit clearer now because I'm seeing it quite close up, but on my TV I was really struggling. I was only seeing the lights and that was it. Galadriel then puts it all together that this is all part of Sauron's plan for him to lure this army here, and so he can take it and make it his own. The camera then lingers a bit on this orc here, and he's also hesitant to give the horn to Adar. And so I think in the next episode this will play out. How, I'm not so sure, but you know, this orc has his wits about him and he does believe Galadriel. Adar then blows the horn and begins the attack. Going back to Celebrimbor, and he thinks he's heard the siege alarm, but Sauron assures him that the city is all under control, but Celebrimbor reacts in a pretty aggressive manner.
I've had quite enough of you telling me where I belong!
Oh my god, he's fighting back. Celebrimbor then storms outside to see that everything's actually okay. It's also daytime and not nighttime, so he has really lost his marbles, I assume. And yeah, he's believing this vision that Sauron has produced in front of him. Sauron then gives Celebrimbor the mithril ore that has been refined into a powder by the dwarf Narvi. Sauron even gives him the best tool to use and says how close they are to achieving their goals, And it's a bit like that picture you see of the miner getting, so close to reaching the gems at the end. So, just go in there, have one last shot at it, and you can make those rings. Celebrimbor then goes back inside, and we see the true nature of what's actually going on outside as Eragon is under attack, and that's where we leave the episode. So my overall thoughts for this episode is I think we have gone backwards a bit. This is much more like the first 4 episodes. Still, Sauron is the strongest part. Eragon, with Celebrimbor, that is quite silly, but is now, finally led up to the whole battle of Eragon next episode. The conversation between Adar and Galadriel was split between the start and the finish, which was okay, but not amazing. What was bad though was the dwarfs, because they've been a bit of a strong point for me, like in that last episode. But here with Prince Durin and Deezer, that scene is so bloody stupid and dumb. I don't know why I did that. So yeah, there's a real down point for them. Numenor, I've said my piece. And then we've had little bits here and there with Arondir and a bit there with the Stranger and Tom Bombadil and Nora in that. And that was really like, they're just sort of there just to be like, oh, we didn't see them last episode. We can't have 2 episodes without seeing them, sort of thing. So yeah, I think in terms of storylines, it really is just Sauron who's been the only thing I've really enjoyed in this whole season, which is pretty bad. When you're considering this is 6 episodes in, we only got 2 left. And as I said, I think next episode is going to be refocused on this Eragon battle. And so what have we got left? We've got 1 episode to sort out lots of different storylines. Isildur, we haven't seen him for a couple of episodes. What's going to happen with him? Or even the ones I spoke about here. Like, they're all going to be wrapping up for the finale. And then obviously we won't see anything until season 3. But I think they're just trying to stretch out so far. And it just feels so thin, so lightweight. And that was an issue in the first season. And it's the same here. So, I just think it hasn't learned the lesson. I've said this in the past, but it still hasn't. And I think even the structure of the season, like there's so much wasted time. There's so many things which didn't need to be as long as they needed to be. Even that scene between Deezer and Prince Durin, I said it was slightly too long. It didn't need to be that long. It could have just been a conversation here or there, but they made a whole scene out of it. So it's things like that which just really stretch this show out and make it quite boring at times, especially with the storylines with the half-puts and that. That was, oh my goodness, like, how far we actually progress. Like, that's the thing. If you actually look from episode 1 to episode 6, we've really gone minimal steps here. And you can't just give the excuse like, oh, that we have to wait and see in season 3, and then they'll do a bit there, and then we'll have to wait till season 4. And then obviously it's a 5-season show which is planned out. It all going to come together in the final season. It's like, how long can you just keep pushing it away? Anyway, what were your thoughts on episode 6 of the Rings of Power season 2? Let me know all that down below. And if you want to watch something else on screen, I have a couple of my recent reviews.